1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Did you know that an estimated 20% of the world's population identifies as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research? Now that number is just the people brave enough to answer as such in these kind of polls. The real number is likely much larger, but many opt not to identify as such. There are many cultures and communities that look down on these sort of individuals, enough so that they feel shame, and sometimes that shame results in death. My name is Jenny Reeves, and by the end of this presentation, I hope to have opened your eyes and your minds, maybe a little bit, to the dire situation that suicide really poses. Well, what is suicide? Merriam-Webster defines suicide as being taking one's own life, intentionally and voluntarily. Or as I like to put it, maybe somebody who feels that they have really run out of options and death was the only viable solution to their problems. There are numerous origins to this feeling of desperation, such as depression, shame, guilt, bullying, sometimes even just the peer pressure to fit in. Now, while depression generally is an imbalance of chemicals and hormones in the brain, those other origins are brought on by our fellow human beings. And while being a member of the LGBT group is not considered a risk in and of itself, they do show to have higher rates of depression, as well as anxiety disorders, as well as higher rates of victimization. 15% of physical abuse cases and 75% of verbal abuse cases have been stated by those identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. While many of us struggle with some of those sources of that desperation throughout our entire lives, sometimes the situation is so dire that it attributes to what accounts for 1.6% of all deaths nationally, at least in 2014, according to the American Association of Suicidology. And while that 1.6% seems very small and insignificant, let's break it down into larger terms. That 1.6% attributes or accounts for 42,773 deaths per year, approximately 117 people per day, or about one person every 12 minutes. So let's think about that. When you go home tonight to watch an episode of your current Netflix binge, in just those 45 minutes, 3 to 4 people have taken their lives just in the US alone. I also want you to consider this. The most susceptible groups for committing suicide are those of young adults, as well as those identifying as LGBT or outside of heterosexuality, or don't consider themselves to be cisgendered. And for those who don't know, cisgendered is classifying yourself mentally to that of your biological gender. Among 15 to 24-year-olds, suicide accounts for this number 2 cause of death among them. And those that identify as LGBT are up to 3 times more likely to try to take their own lives. And those specifically that feel that they've been rejected by their own families, or those that they felt should have been supporting them all along, are even 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. Notably, 30% of transgendered individuals are even more likely to attempt their own lives at some point. And while I may have only scratched the surface, as far as the depth of these statistics, I hope that these numbers have shown maybe just a little bit how we need to show everybody at least some sort of love and support. And in conclusion, I'll leave you with this thought. 1 out of every 21 Americans knows somebody who has committed suicide. And even if you don't fall under that statistic just yet, chances are pretty good someday you could. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Good job.